And it looks like this box is a little bit battered, really. The main box. This is supposed to be a new watch I purchased from Citizen. As you can see, it's been pummeled before being put in the outer packaging for whatever reason. I mean, the rest of this inside looks okay, but maybe it's just a bit too loose in there. And all these bits have come out as well. But either way, it's what's inside that counts, isn't it? And what we have here should be Citizen's new Tsuyosa dive watch, or at least dive style watch. And this one looked quite interesting online, so I pulled the trigger. This particular colour version set me back £329 on the Citizen site, and you'll find a link to it in the video description if you do want to check it out for yourself. Can the Tsuyosa work as a dive watch? Now, there are two colours of this watch available, and I went with the safer of the two choices, that being the navy blue. And I have to say, I really like the look of this thing straight out of the box. But yeah, you can also grab this in a green gold version, so green dial and bezel with a gold coloured case. Still stainless steel material, of course. And that one is a little bit pricier than this one. Here in the UK, the other version is £349, so a £20 difference. But yeah, I'm surprised at how well this works. Maybe it looks a bit better than I expected, actually. And there's something about the case, I think. For whatever reason, I don't know, it seems nicer on the side. I think maybe it's just because it feels thinner, or at least the mid case seems thinner compared to the standard Tsuyosa. Because in all honesty, compared to the standard 40mm Tsuyosa, because this apparently is 40mm as well, it doesn't look all that much thicker considering this is a bezeled watch, or at least a rotating bezel watch. And as a result, it certainly looks a little bit sleeker, I'd say. The Tsuyosa Shore, they're calling this, by the way. Shore as in shoreline, not as in confident. And the code name for these watches is NJ0230 series. Now, the first and most obvious port of call has to be this. I'm not sure what it is for me, but dive watches have got to have a good sounding bezel. And that's pretty standard fare. Feels decent enough, not the nicest noise. Does seem, I think, to be an aluminium bezel in there. Just kind of your standard sound, but does seem relatively well aligned there. And not too much backplay either, which is good. Now, I'll give you a close-up as I whiz through the specs on this one, because the specs on this are slightly different than the base Tsuyosa. So on the site, this one just says automatic movement 42-hour power reserve. So I anticipate it's the 8000 series based on the thickness here, but we'll check in a second. This one has a sapphire crystal as well, and viewing angles on this look okay. Still a bit hazy, just tend to be a kind of running theme with Citizen sapphires, far from the clearest crystals out there. And the big change here, aside from the addition of that rotating bezel, is the water resistance rating. Now, this one doesn't have a screw down crown, as I've just found out there, so it's really more of a dive style watch, but you can submerge this definitely to a greater extent than some of the other Tsuyosa watches. So it's still got a nice screw back here, a little bit of a prominent one, and that comes with a 10 bar or 100 meter water resistance rating, which is definitely kind of like the sweet spot, really, that you'd want most watches to be at ideally. That means you can dunk it without really worrying. You can definitely go swimming in this, even if proper diving may be off the cards, depending on what depth you go down to. And the movements in the back there does look a little bit different than some of the others. Now, the text there says caliber 8210, which is a movement I've looked at many times before, but I've never seen it presented quite like that with that text. So maybe they're doing things a little bit differently these days. All seems quite quiet for an 8000 series, really quiet in fact. Wonder if they've maybe addressed that. Let me give this a shake. It definitely seems much quieter, so maybe they've fiddled with that a little bit. Can't hear that whatsoever, which is good. That rotor's got, as you can see, a really smooth action there, so really happy to see that. Still not the thinnest movement in the world, though, as you can see. You won't be able to get that super slim profile that you can get with the 9000 series, but not quite as egregious considering it's like a diver-style watch, most of which are inherently quite thick. Now, this one still maintains the same integrated bracelet look, so it's a bit of a hybrid, really. And this looks to be the bracelet, I think, similar to the one on the standard Tsuyosa. So you may remember if you've seen the small second Tsuyosa, that one uses a slightly different and arguably a tiny bit better bracelet. This one's still good, though. You can see we've got a nice milled clasp here. And you've got 2 micro adjustment holes, which is probably just about enough. That should get you about half a link coverage there. And the links are already pretty small, so I imagine most people get a good fit with this one. As for the dial itself, well, I really like this particular tone of blue that they've gone for. There's nothing super technically impressive going on here, but all looks quite neat. And because it's like a dive style watch, it kind of suits the Cyclops this time, which was a bit of a bugbear for me on the standard Tsuyosa. Now, some of this here is just the angle of the camera. This one actually is quite well aligned. I could just get a nicer looking light by tilting it. And yeah, it doesn't look as out of place here. It kind of fits the aesthetic. And yeah, maybe it just looks a bit less vanilla or boring than the standard Tsuyosa to me, which was already a fairly cool watch. And yeah, I do think personally this one kind of works. Does look like we've got plenty of luminescence on here too. No lume pip though on the bezel, so I'll be interested to see if any of that bezel lights up when we get to the low light test. But for now, let's get you some measurements to see how this stacks up versus the other Tsuyosas. And it was these measurements that were my main bugbear really with the original Tsuyosa. That was a really popular sports watch, and it is 40mm by the way. But yeah, the original was really popular, but was always a little bit bulbous for my liking. Lug to lug here is 45.2 if you want the technical lug to lug, or if you're including both of those end links, which are kind of fixed in place, is just over 50mm. So while you can remove those, you're going to be limited to custom straps only really. And thickness here with the flat part of the crystal is 12.7, which isn't really that bad for an automatic dive watch. And it also doesn't look huge, does it, from a distance? Kind of just looks averaged size. And while it's probably a bit too big for me, I do think this looks really good on actually. I do like the look of it. Not the most original design ever, but really like the case down the side. I think it works quite well with the bezel there as well. Has like this chamfer running the whole length, and it seems to like encompass the bezel to some degree. If I bring in my reflector here, you might get to see a little bit more of that. I do like the colour they've gone for here. Now, it is a pretty limited selection of colours at launch. That tends to be the case with Citizen. And then if the watch catches on, then they release it in every colour under the sun, it seems. And they do play around with the different dials. So if this one proves popular, then do expect perhaps some sunburst colours later down the line. Or some with some sort of guilloche texture on, perhaps. Now, on my 6¼ inch wrist here, this one's maybe just a hair too big, as you can see. If they ever released a 37mm like they did with the other Tsuyosa, that one would probably be more up my alley. But overall, it's far from a large watch. And here's a look at the side profile on wrist, and as you can see, not sure it looks quite as bulbous as the original, which is a definite improvement. Still a little bit of projection from the rear though, where that case back comes out. I'll do a quick crystal check here against my Casio Oceanus, which I'll use as a control because I know it definitely has a sapphire crystal, and it also has a similar level of crystal clarity, I'd say. So this will normally give somewhere between about 3 to 5 bars on this diamond selector. Yeah, we got 4 there. And we're looking for something similar with this Citizen, which I don't think they're going to be lying, to be honest. And yeah, we get about a 3 bar rating instead. So maybe not quite as high, but it is still a sapphire crystal. Do wish they would put in some better anti-reflective coating though, considering the price, because in the US, this watch isn't exactly cheap. You're talking about $495 for this blue one, or $550 for the green gold version, which I think is more than the converted currency amount that you'd effectively pay here in the UK for whatever reason, maybe to do with tariffs or something. But yeah, at that price, you know, it's not exactly a cheap watch. It's more of a mid-range one. Either way, let's see if it holds up in the dark, eh? And from memory, Citizen Lume has always been about average. It's always been better than the likes of Casio, but tends to fall short of Seiko and definitely the Chinese brands. Now, unfortunately, looks like there's nothing present on that bezel, which is a bit of a shame, but maybe that on the markers is a bit better than expected. Let's see when the torch goes out, eh? And initial brightness is good. Not sure it's apparent on the camera, but to the naked eye, the luminescence on the hands is definitely a stage or two brighter than that on the markers. And the markers do seem to be fading slightly faster, which I guess is the way round you'd want it if you had to choose. But at this price, this level of lume is very much average, and certainly nothing special. So there's a quick first look at this new Citizen Tsuyosa Shore Dive Watch. I do think it's a rather handsome little addition to Citizen's line here. I doubt it'll sell quite as well as the standard Tsuyosa, which I think was it's maybe a bit more versatile, but perhaps I do like this a little bit more. Something about the case there. Certainly has a nicer sounding movement, and I would expect some good grey market availability on this watch if the original was anything to go by. So perhaps you'll be able to get this at a slightly better price than it's launched at some point. You'll find a link to it in the video description if you do want to check it out for yourself. But overall, yeah, I think this is a pretty solid release.